the moral high ground is not a theoretical thing like, oh, you know what, we feel so much better about ourselves, we pat ourselves on the back and go, okay, we don't do torture. A lot of people died, but we don't do torture and we feel a little bit better about ourselves. If it was just that, it would still be worthwhile. I think the moral high ground is important on theory alone, but it's not just theoretical. What it does is it saves lives. In the long run, what it does is it says to people, hey, you know what? We're better than this. So if somebody's trying to convince you that the U.S. is terrible and heinous, don't believe the hype. And look, people might say, oh, you're never going to convince terrorists. But the point isn't to convince people who've already become terrorists. The point is we have 1 billion Muslims in the world that are in the middle. And that some of them, and 99% of them, will never go to violence anyway. But we're fighting over the 1% that might or might not. And do you think it makes a difference in the long run if it turns out the U.S. is the right things versus the wrong things? Hell yes, it makes a difference. We had, I believe it was a Newsweek reporter who had gone into Pakistan, and he said on the walls of all the people who had turned to the dark side, become terrorists, were the pictures of Abu Ghraib, okay, and pictures of Guantanamo. And they used that as their motivation, and they used it to get recruits. All those people wind up killing us. Does what we do make a difference? Hell yes. Hell yes. And the less we torture people and the more that we are on the moral high ground and we do the right things, the less enemies we'll have and the more allies we'll have and the less people will die. Now, having said that, let me tell you the downside of torture. One, what we just explained is an enormous downside of torture, obviously. Number two, we're actually killing people. Nobody mentions that anymore. That's just water under the bridge. There was 98 guys killed in U.S. custody. Okay, Human Rights Watch has documented that. 34 of them have already been called homicides by the United States military. We killed 34 people. We beat them to death. Okay, in Bagram Air Base, we killed an innocent taxi driver, and we did a Palestinian hanging on him. And the person who did the interrogation later said, "Yeah, before we beat him to death, we pretty much knew he was the wrong guy and he was innocent. Okay, but we killed him anyway." But I'm going to put that aside. I'm going to put those two enormous things aside for a second and tell you about how torture costs lives. We tortured Sheikh Ibn al-Libi. He was one of the top al-Qaeda guys. And we captured him, and we wanted to torture him because we weren't getting enough information out of him. But we thought, well, we are legally bound not to do that to some degree, so let's send him over to Egypt where they can really torture him. So what did they do in Egypt? They buried him alive. Okay? First, they did the first level of torture. That didn't work. Then they buried him alive and said, we're gonna just keep you there. And then that didn't work. And then they took him out of his mock burial and they beat him to a bloody pulp. Right? And then he said, and then they asked him the leading question. All right, tell us the connection between Iraq and Al Qaeda. And we now have declassified CIA cables as to what happened in that interrogation. And they say he literally didn't know what story to make up because there was no connection. So he said, what do you want me to tell you? What do you need me to make up? And they said, no, tell us about the Iraq Al-Qaeda link. So he made up a story about how Iraq was giving weapons training to Al-Qaeda guys like himself. And they stopped beating him. And he's like, oh, thank God, that worked. And then Colin Powell took that story and went to the United Nations and gave a speech about the Iraq Al-Qaeda link we got from a top Al-Qaeda suspect. And that was al-Libi, and we know that now. We invaded Iraq and got nearly 4,000 Americans killed and nearly 30,000 Americans wounded and maimed and disfigured for life and hundreds of thousands of Iraqis killed based on wrong information we got from torture. Now, is all of that worth it for a theoretical ticking time bomb scenario that isn't even true or realistic? And the answer is, of course, hell no. But when you turn on the TV, all you ever hear is, oh, people are about to die, you got to do the torture, it's the only thing that works. No, it doesn't work. Unless, of course, you're Dick Cheney and you wanted that false information about the Iraq Al-Qaeda link to start a war with Iraq. In which case, it worked pretty perfectly for you.